Comply or die. Comply or die. Comply.
Welcome to GRC Uncensored, an experimental podcast designed to elevate real conversations with GRC professionals, auditors, regulators, and those building programs around it. Your hosts Troy Fine and Elliot Volkman will offer unfiltered conversations that dig into the reality of how governance, risk, and compliance function that are often buried under millions in marketing spend. Now, on to your hosts.
Hello and welcome back to GRC Uncensored. I am Elliot Volkman, your producer, alongside Kendra and Troy, or TJ, our hosts. And today we have two wonderful guests to talk about a very important topic that falls to the world of GRC. So, Chris, maybe we'll start with you. Who are you? Why are you here? And then we'll talk about your background and how that relates to our topic.
Well, sure. I'm Chris Honda. I have no idea really why I'm here other than to talk GRC stuff. I work at Whistic. I manage our GRC and security program. I help run a small team, and I do all of our audit nerdy stuff, which is really fun for me. I'm just weird like that.
Love it. All right, Jonathan, how about you?
Hey, I'm Jonathan LeBaron. I work for MasterControl. We make a software solution that helps life science manufacturers meet regulatory requirements. You know, if you've had a pharmaceutical you've used or maybe a med device put into you, we probably were a part of it at some point. And how I got here, kind of like Chris, I think it was an accident, but I am happy to be here. We'll see how much you regret it as this conversation goes on.
Oh,
That is exactly
nothing is
how
an
these
accident.
conversations start. I gotta say, Jonathan, you have a fantastic voice.
Thank you.
When I edit this thing, everyone's gonna be like hearing the bass rumble in their cars when they listen to this episode. It is fantastic.
I'm real excited about that. That's a good compliment. I'll take it.
Wait.
All right.
I want to
Troy?
know what you think about my voice now, Elliot.
Oh,
You've never
yeah.
given me any type
You don't
of
let me
comment
call you
like
TJ,
that.
so I'm not gonna give you any compliments.
I didn't hear what you said because I was talking over you, so I'm just going to listen to it
Yeah,
later.
exactly the point. All right, Troy, why are we here? What are we talking about?
I think we're going to talk about AI today in GRC and ISO 42001.
Yeah, no one has ever talked about AI at all in the last couple of years or anything. But in GRC,
No
there's
one's
at least,
invested in it either.
Yeah, of course not. Do you want to narrow that down a little bit as far as GRC? Because there's people adopting AI, there's people dealing with shadow IT situations. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to shape this conversation around that lovely topic of AI?
I want to ask one other question before we get into it. Very important. With any AI conversation, I always want to know, what is the last thing you asked ChatGPT?
We got to start with Kendra.
Should I? Should I
Did I gotta get the beeping button ready?
No. Where to bury a dead body? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No, I'm
No,
kidding.
that-
It doesn't
that's-
even. It doesn't give you that answer. Actually, this is kind of embarrassing. But the last thing that I asked ChatGPT to do was to create a lesson plan for me, because I'm really, really, really trying to improve my French since I live in Quebec. So I had it spit out a 30-day lesson plan for me to try and improve. Which, I don't know why I'm embarrassed of that, but I am. So
Why are you
that's it.
embarrassed? I think
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was
know.
so benign. That was so benign. I have no
I
idea
don't-
why you were worried.
I'm probably because my husband is sitting right over here, and he's listening to me say that, and he's probably you're an idiot. Oh. But yeah, that is the last thing that I used it for. So
Makes you feel better. I actually have an embarrassing one. Apparently, this show on Nickelodeon called All That came back for a short stint. I was very confused when I saw this date range, but it came back for a year in 2019 to 2020. I thought it ended when I was young, not old and decrepit. Anyways, that is when I asked ChatGPT, and it helped clarify that. For some reason, it came back for a short little period of time.
interesting. I loved that show growing up.
That's pretty
So-
good. Chris, how about you?
Oh, I ask it so many weird things. It's hard to remember what the last one is. It might have been something language related. I lived in Korea for a while, so it's probably how do I say this in a little less formal way. But also, I ask it a lot of really weird law-related questions too. Hey, give me a rundown on the basics of copyright law. No reason, just get bored and like to talk with the robots, and it's really weird. So yeah, I still know nothing about copyright law. I'm not a lawyer.
It's actually funny that you ask about this. It's really timely. This morning I was a conversation with one of our engineering VPs, And he was like, you know what you should try. And he gave me this prompt, and I'll read it to you real quick. Meta question. Can you share with me some influences that may not show up in memory, but are established on me as a user? So it went through and showed me all the profiles it had built on me based on inference for what I've asked it. And it was spot on, down to like my favorite video games, my favorite books, my favorite genres. And I have told it none of that stuff. I was blown away. He was like, it's cool, isn't it? Yo.
Yeah, air quotes there. That's not creepy
Terrifying.
at all.
Yeah.
I
Well,
was
it's that-
surprised.
That kind of reminds me of, that feature that Google has where I can't remember exactly the site, but you can go to a site and it'll show you like basically what it knows about you, like your shopping
Yeah.
preferences, political affiliations, your approximate age. Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah. But at the same time, and I'm going to do this because I know a lot of people have their skin crawl. But for me, it's kind of like, good, finally someone's going to sell me what I'm looking for. I don't want to deal with all the crummy ads that have nothing to do with me, right? So like, there's give and take, but for me, it's kind of like, I'd rather have some targeted ads, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm on the wrong base there, but that's me.
Everyone in Europe would disagree with.
They would. A lot of them. Well, a lot of them would, yeah.
Is it Nina? Do I have to answer my own question? I don't know if it was the last one. Actually, I went through my history and I'm just picking the most embarrassing one for you all. My wife and I were watching Shark Tank, and Mark Cuban invested in Dude Wipes. Do you know what that is, Dude Wipes?
Yes.
You know that?
I
Well,
follow the CEO. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were watching it, it was a Gemini ad for Google, and they were trying to come up with ads for Dude Wipes. So I'm like, Jess, what's our wife's name? I'm like, you can actually, this will work with ChatGPT. I could do it right now. She didn't believe me. So I asked ChatGPT to come up with a social media post for a funny dude wipe at social media post and read them off to her. And it was pretty good, but she didn't believe that like AI could do that. And I'm like, yeah, like that's how easy it is. So Dude Wipes, if you're listening, we do want sponsors, and we will definitely take you as a sponsor.
I will tell you, almost every podcast I listen to, for some reason they sponsor it. So
Do they really?
be careful with your words there.
That's super funny. Maybe
Well,
you should
Mark
give them a
Cuban-
taste, Troy. Read one of those.
Well, Mark, if you're
Samples.
listening too, I live in Pittsburgh and you're from Pittsburgh. So let's make this happen.
All right,
You wanna
Troy,
make a
redirect
deal with
us.
GRC Uncensored.
All right, Troy, what AI framework are we chatting about?
ISO 42001, everyone's favorite buzz framework. That's right, Jonathan and Chris? I'm pretty
Oh,
sure
yeah.
you guys are familiar with that.
Hot
no, in all
stuff.
seriousness, though, I am curious. I think you guys are both implementing this at your current companies. I'm curious kind of where you're all at in that process, and if it's been more complex than you expected, less complex than you expected, and kind of how's it going in general? I'm just curious. I don't know many people that have started doing this yet.
We have been implementing for a little while now. The question of how complex has it been, and compared to my expectations, far more complex. But the reason being not because of the standard. The standard itself is run of the mill. You pull up the ISO standard and you go, this looks like stuff I've read before. This is not surprising, not even a little bit of it. But as you go through and you say, okay, cool, how do I start doing an impact analysis? How do I go through and do risk analysis, impact assessment? How do you do a risk analysis on an AI system? That starts getting grittier than you'd think. It definitely got grittier than I thought. And then I suddenly fell into this world of regulation that was like this amorphous ball that I could not get my hands around. It was crazy. I was like, well, how do I make everyone happy? Because I know I'm going to implement this, and 1 year down the road, someone's going to ask me a question about some regulation that I didn't know about when we started, right? I mean, it's gotten hairy. There are experts in the field who are not experts on everything, even though they'll try to sell you on it. So anyway, where we're at this point is we've got our manual, we've got our documentation. That's my main niche is I love writing out the documentation. I'm a freak like that. And as I've written out all the stuff, we're feeling really good about bringing in an assessor.
Well, did you use AI to help you create the documents?
You know something crazy? I used it to summarize some of the regulation. Now, I had to go back and reread it. And honestly, it probably took longer because I summarized it, because it's prone to inaccuracies. And there were a lot of inaccuracies in the summary. That's not good. That's no good when you go into the all right, show me your evidence for how you meet this claim. You're like, that's not a thing. And they go, actually, it is. The summary was not my favorite.
Yeah, so it didn't actually help you.
No, I had to do double the work, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Interesting. What about you, Chris? How's it going at Whistic? Is it easier, harder? Any surprises?
Honestly, actually, a lot of my experience has been pretty similar to Jonathan. We did use AI to kind of help us prep, but more the other way around, though. Meaning we did the reading, we made some of our assumptions, started putting some things in place, and then we ran our assumptions in through some AI tools to check. It was all right. Well, according to these points, we're pretty close. We just maybe need to either add some extra considerations in, or we need to change our perspective just a little bit. But all in all, it's pretty similar to what Jonathan said. We're also going to be heading into our stage 1 probably hopefully in the next 6 weeks or so. And there's been some things that have been actually a little easier than we thought were going to be. And maybe some of that's been because we have a few years of ISO 27001 under our belt, right? So just understanding what ISO is asking for. And that's kind of gotten us prone to being, essentially, we're nervous to do just the stated minimum in the standard. So we've taken an approach of, hey, look, this is what ISO says, but we also know that this is very likely what our auditors are going to be asking for. So we're just going to build it out towards this. Essentially, we're trying to not go above and beyond or not go overboard, but wherever is reasonable and possible, save ourselves some feature pain. We've tried to go above the requirements here and there. So it's definitely been tough from a perspective of also, right, like John, you were saying, from a risk analysis perspective, but it's also saved us, right? One of the more specific elements of where it's kind of helped us be in a better position is there was some discussion of, hey, we're going to move into hosting our own custom models and training on that. Well, we can do that, right? There's nothing forbidding that in the ISO standard, but it does certainly add complexity. It adds a whole new school of risk, essentially, that we hadn't really considered, had no process in identifying, maintaining, remediating. So it's not become a no, but it's just, hey, until we know how we want to do this, let's maybe shelve this until the benefit is clearly outweighing the risks that are associated with that. So yeah, it's given us a lot of questions, but it's also helped us a lot in conversations with customers too. I mean, I don't know, John, if it's been the same for you, but when we tell people that we're going towards that, it's a different vibe than saying, oh, we're going for our SOC 2 again, or our ISO 27001 cert. People are seem to be genuinely interested in how that's changed, how we thought about that, and how that's going to affect our service going forward.
Yeah, I have to echo that this standard has become a must for us, and only because of what our customer base is. We got folks who are making needles that are going to surgery, or hip replacements, or cochlear implants. I mean, they come to us and they've got the CFRs in one hand, and they go, where does this apply to your AI? And we go, let's go get a cert real quick, because we're not going to be able to sell this to you folks. You are so risk averse. And rightfully so. That customer base should darn well be. I do not want someone operating with tools that have not undergone stringent review, right? But at the same time, on our boat, we're like, oh man, we got to get our butts in gear. We're going to be buried by this. People want AI, but they need to have evidence that it's not going to, increase significantly their risk for using our product. So, yeah, seriously.
How has the business or not been receptive of the standard and the requirements? Have you run into any roadblocks with people not wanting to do things, or thinking that this doesn't matter and it's bullshit?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's been a couple of my calls today is, hey, how come we can't use this or that for this use case, right? And sometimes I feel like, right, just from a GRC perspective, this is where we got to do our jobs a little better in communicating the why behind things, right? Like there's no such thing as over communicating from our perspective. A lot of that has been, right, well, I want to use this particular tool, let's say ChatGPT, and I wanted to be able to ingest these sets of data. Sometimes that could be something sensitive, like contract data, financial data, customer data, right? Even with, for example, right, like a lot of this is hypothetical, but even with protections like data retention for 30 days, having that toggle for no training, having everything managed under central management tool, right? Teams plans type thing, right? There's always going to be that, well, what if factor that we just can't control with. And that's where we do have to kind of balance because, right, you always hear about, oh, well, there's these controls in place and then all of a sudden they're ineffective when they get bypassed. We do try our best to balance that with, hey, look, we ran some testing and building out different marketing or sales campaigns or different pitch decks using these tools, and it's given us way better results in a fraction of the time than if we had built this out manually. So is it worth the risk to say, no, you got to do everything by hand, take way more time, or run the risk of it being stolen? That's a discussion where we're still at. And I know that's not one of the focuses of the ISO standard, but that's one of the ones that we've kind of chosen to include in the scope is, look, like it's inevitable, right? Kind of like it is for ISO 27001, managing your vendors, your service providers. It's been a point of concern where we don't want to be the ones to say, no, you can't use it because of this hypothetical thing that might have negative impact. But also, we don't know the extent of how bad that thing might be. So someone's got to be willing to take the risk. And if it's not us, that's a different conversation.
That's a super fantastic question. And I have to echo a ton of what Chris said about this. Big adoption issues we run into with people really buying into this come down to like our third-party risk management. So as we dig into, who's putting what, I mean, my InfoSec team pulled up in their little black van today, as they do, on my Slack, and went, hey, here's a list of all the names of people who've been shoving stuff in this, whatever. And I look at it and I go, okay, yeah, we probably should do something about that. But at the same time, here's the data flow diagrams. Here's the risk assessments we've done. Here's what we know. Risk is, minimal on a lot of this stuff. We've done a good job of mitigating things where none of our proprietary information is out. Heavens, we protected all of our customer data. Everything's good. Just because Joe Smith over in this corner of marketing plugged in this infographic does not necessarily mean that's a big issue. But we also have things in our ISO 27001 standard that say you can't just use whatever vendor whenever you want to, right? We run into all this stuff where people just, they struggle to follow some of the stuff that's already established because, well, it's AI and it works so fast and innovation is amazing. And this doesn't apply here, right? We run into the issue where our upper management says, we want to innovate at all costs. Also, we want to regulate at all costs. And we go, okay. And I don't think that that's specific to our org. I think that falls to a lot of orgs who want to do everything right all the time. There's some conflicting priorities that fall into there, and it's all over the place, right?
Oh, John, I got to do a fast follow on that, right? Like, I think there's been a lot of dialogue in that if there's any sort of AI usage, that 42001 should be an expected appendage to the 27001 standard, right? Yes. Like, there's just so many tie-ins that it's hard to say, oh, well, we follow this for a very specific subset of the services we provide and the expectations around how we do, but not from a more general, right? A systematized, here's how we're just going to protect data, your environment, our environment in general, right? I know it's overly reductive, but the way that I've gotten in the habit of saying is, look, AI is just software. It is just another thing of software. So how can you preclude it from the SOC 2, the ISO 27001, the CIS standards, where it says, look, you have to have a regimented way of managing this. Otherwise, it's going to blow up in your face one day, some way. It just will.
Wholeheartedly agree. And I know Troy's skin probably crawl as an auditor, just coming in and being like, hey, I noticed you have exceptions for these tools. Why the hell do you have exceptions for these tools? And they go, it's AI, right? What are you saying? That's crazy. It's a tool. You said over here. Anyway, yep. I cannot agree more.
So from the third-party risk management perspective, given the fact that you all are both taking your companies through this certification process to present that to your customers, like, how has that changed the way that you're evaluating those new vendors that, your internal employees are coming to you and saying, hey, I want to use this AI tool? Like, how has that transformed the way that you're thinking about third-party risk?
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and say my biggest problem is not new vendors. New vendors are fine. They come in, I can do the assessment. I'm prepared for that. My problem is old vendors who put a button to just turn on new AI functions. And I got people downstairs who go, this looks cool. And they turn it on, right? And they start using it. And I'm not trying to hit anyone on our org because I think this happens just about freaking anywhere, right? You got people who are just sitting minding their own business and they're like, hey, would you like your job to go 2 times faster, 10 times faster, 20 times faster? Just hit this button.
Yeah.
And it's cool. But also, as soon as you hit that button, I've now got to consider that OpenAI is now a sub-processor. I didn't look at that, but it'd be great to know before you hit that button, right?
Yeah. Not to throw any particular vendors under the bus, but a few weeks, I guess actually probably a few months ago now, but when Slack started really pushing their AI stuff, and it was like everyone was getting that pop-up of turn this on. I can't even tell you the number of messages I got around that. And I'm just like, don't touch.
My experience has been pretty much exactly what John said. It's right. We can't control for what we don't know, and right, that's kind of where it's tough. The IT security department, how we are, our team is really small. So we have one IT guy, one security guy. I'm the GRC guy, and we don't have the view into all the tools, right? Like I wish it were the case, but it just wasn't prudent. I mean, some ways still just isn't prudent for us to pay for an extra seat to have that insight, but. Right, that comes with a lot of blind spots for us. And shoot, like, right, Slack is one of them where people are like, hey, so I've been using this Slack AI feature, and I flip a table. Like, yep. So we're gonna have to turn that off. Hang on. It's not that we don't want. And again, it's like we were both saying before. It's not that we want to stand in the way of productivity, of innovation, of getting things done better, faster, easier. But the risk that goes with that is we're not saying no. We're just saying maybe not right now, or yes, but yes, and right is look, before we turn these things on, just let us know that this is an option. You know how fast we can be with vendor reviews sometimes, right? Like we haven't processed down where, I mean, except for in the most critical states, we can get a review done same day. We just need you to know. It just becomes a problem. It becomes rather more of a problem when you pretend like it's not a problem, or when you know that you should be telling us and you don't, right? No is not usually in our vocabulary, but if you're going around sneaking, trying to get something under the radar, it is certainly going to be a problem then. But it's exactly like you said, John, right? You think about any of the big sub-processes, right? A lot of them just slapped AI functionality in there, which is great. Just don't turn it on until we've had a chance to look at it. And again, we'll be fine.
Yeah. I want to jump real quick on this because something that is interesting to me is that the real concern is not that people are dumb. I mean, some are, but like
that's definitely a concern.
It's a concern, but it's not my primary one because maybe it is, I guess, where I'm going with this now. It's that I don't have time as a professional. I have not yet had the speed to react to how fast the market is growing. And I'm not saying for like new AI tools. I'm saying for current existing tools who will slap a wrapper on top of existing models and sell that. And no one is fast enough to keep up with it. I don't care who you work for. You are not fast enough to keep up with it. The thing that we're trying to do and is working really well is getting out a general education to our teams of saying, here's how you should look at it. We're not going to tell you no necessarily, but we need to know where's the data going? Who has ownership over tokens, right? What is happening here? As long as we can take a look at it and let you know the risk level of what you're doing, because that's what your managers are going to want to know too. And that's how we approve or disapprove how we use things. Compliance comes in and we say, hey, you grab this. This is high risk. Just so you know, you'll be accepting that high risk by introducing this tool. That's all I want to do, friends. I just want to tell you how risky your solution is. I'm not here to say yes or no. That's not my job necessarily, right? I am going to write it into a policy and you're going to sign that policy. And then we're going to see where we go. But don't hide stuff. I love what Chris said. But hiding it is impeding the progress of us keeping up with governance practices, right?
So are you saying everyone's going to need ISO 42001 so that we can all check that box and move on with our lives?
I don't know about that because, and you would understand this, the reason ISO 42001 is probably going to take off is just because it's ISO and it'll be well adopted. Right. And people are going to want a cert that says if you're using AI, is it good or not? But I would argue that if people are doing, this is going to be an unpopular opinion, and I might get chased down later for this. Sorry. If you're doing the current ISO standards that are like widely propagated, like 27001, and you're doing a good job on your supply chain, you probably already have a lot of what 42001 needs you to do. But it's a shiny cert and it's going to help people sell things. And you'll get better adoption from top management if you can prove this cert helps us sell things, if that makes any sense.
I would agree with that if the main use is, if a lot of your use of AI is like third-party open source tools. But if you're like developing your own model internally, then I do think that AI kind of takes a whole different risk approach.
You make a good point. So what I will say is this: 42001 is going to take a much more valuable place in your org if you're operating as a producer of AI tech. And I don't know where you guys fall, Chris, but that's where we are. We have our own models, we have our own stuff, and I can't talk a ton about it, but we're a producer. And so we want to show that what we're making, what we're building, and what we're selling to our customers, they can trust, right?
No, I absolutely agree. And that's where it's tough. We're not producers. I think we fall more in the developer role, right? I think it kind of depends on, there's a couple different classifications, but we're more in the developer, right? So we don't just build a simple wrapper as well, right? Like I was shaking my head, nodding my head, more like when you were saying, oh, like some people just slap a wrapper, and yeah, that's scary stuff because there's zero protection, oversight, control, assurance that goes with that. But we've done our best to kind of take it from a producer perspective, at least in terms of accountability, responsibility, and being able to demonstrate that to our customers, right? And that's where, like you, John, I'm probably going to get chased down for this. I'm hoping, but I'm not too optimistic that we're going to kind of take this as a refresh in terms of how we use ISO certifications. Not so much to where we can move away from, oh, you have the ISO cert, you're good, right? Just blanket approval there. Hey, let me look at your SOA. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about what, like, more in depth about the scope, right? Is this just your internal tooling usage, right? Is this just how you govern use of ChatGPT and Gemini and such? Or is this going to go into how you're introducing artificial intelligence capabilities in your software products, right? Because they're different. And that's part of where we've tried to build that in. And some of the, I'll say, probably unnecessary, but hopefully helpful complexity is we've brought that all into scope within itself. And I'm hoping to use that more of an assurance of a customer trust building tool after we get certified. Again, fingers crossed. But then we can go and speak to that as, hey, we encourage you to go look at our statement of applicability. Here's our SOA. Here's a list of all the evidence that we use for it. Here's a link to all the documents so you can read them yourselves. So that is not just a, hey, rely on the ISO shininess, this is great, but here's the proof in the pudding of why and how we built it to be trustworthy, right? Mm-hmm. Is it perfect? No. Is it going to be completely secure? No. But also I'd be more skeptical of someone that was claiming it to be both of those things, right? But at least you can make your own assessment. We've had another party come in and say, look, you're doing essentially all that you can. You brought in essentially the full scope of anything we could expect. Make your own decision, and leading out with that transparency. So,
yeah, I think what'll be really interesting to see in the upcoming years as we go into this is the companies that are making those high risk, high profile AI systems that are doing major decision making for folks, especially in a medical scenario or what have you, employment benefits, even, financials, and seeing how they navigate this and what they do to implement, to manage those systems. Because as much as Chris and I are, doing our very best to make sure these aren't just checkbox hitting the standards, there are some people that they're going to have to jump through some real hoops, and they would be an awesome case study to see, okay, what did you do? How did you, if they use the standard, how did you use the standard to meet these requirements? Because I'm not in a system that's deciding if someone, gets their financial, whatever, your loan gets approved or your housing gets approved, or you're the next person to receive this transplant because of XYZ, right? I'm glad I'm not making those systems, but someone's got to figure out how to govern them.
That's a whole extra, not even one level, that's levels above what
yeah.
Right. And shoot, you're in the medical field. There's all sorts of stuff that you've had to do that I've not even had to consider. And I'm thinking, man, this is complex stuff. But also, right, it's exactly like what you're saying, John. I think that's probably why we've not seen a lot of AI powered fintech or medtech or GovTech popping up, right? Like it's been very minimal, but once you get to that certain threshold of this is the functionality that we expect from this tool, and it's AI powered, that scrutiny is just going to be thrown right on top. Okay, prove it. Prove that you're being transparent, that you're being fair, that you're managing bias appropriately, right? And until that can be done, which just takes a whole extra level of focus and attention, that's going to be a sticking point, I think, especially once we start getting into the consumer level.
You'll see it right now. I was on the health advisory committee meeting not a long while back for the FDA, and I'm sitting there listening to these regulators who are baffled at what they do with this, by the way, already widely used radiology program and analyzes people's broken bones. It's all over the place. Doctors are using it, and it is not necessarily regulated to the degree they would like to have it regulated. Half the people in that room didn't even know how to say the words they needed to say to explain what they were looking at. It was bonkers. I was so surprised. And it'll be a cool field to watch in the coming future for folks like us. It'll make cool models for us to kind of take, those levels down to where we are, Chris. And I'll continue to pray that we don't make anything that puts us in that category. If we do, I'll let you know, and it'll be awesome. But right now we don't, thank goodness.
I don't see any regulation coming into play anytime soon to help with any of this. Based on the current.
It's a divided space too. People are all over the place, and I'm not gonna even try to start digging into recent events, man. But just watch the news.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna build an AI company, you should come to the U.S. That's my advice.
Well, I mean, shoot, it's the same thing with privacy. How long have we been fighting over national privacy legislation? It's never going to happen, right? Like,
we have no privacy regulation. We have no AI regulation. This is turning out no employees to do anything anyways. America is we are right where we want to be with all this.
We're building the AI to be the employees, Troy.
Exactly. Who needs people?
I see no risk. That's all I'm saying. I see no risk. We're going to be.
But I can't even begin to emphasize it. Troy, can I just say this? And real quick, there are people who are like, let's get that regulation. And I'm like, it is too late. If you think that you can protect your data now, it's gonzo. Like, it's out there. It's being used.
True.
Sorry. Decades ago, man. It's in a building somewhere. Many buildings now. And probably not even still in this country, if we're being honest.
That's true.
So, I don't know. It'll make people have
and the
more
podcast. There's no point. All right.
Let's just get out of here. What are we doing?
So what was the driving force for both of your organizations to start seeking the ISO 40? I almost said 27,001. ISO 47,001 was it?
42,001.
42,001. Jeez, whatever.
All these numbers.
We'll cut it out.
ISO 42001. There you go. See, I'll do it like the robot.
That was actually the CAPTCHA. That was the CAPTCHA. So you're a human is what we learned.
There you
just
go.
now.
Yeah,
Elliot was supposed to mess that up.
But yeah, what was the kind of driving force? I mean, you're both in such dynamically different industries. What was the tipping point for both organizations to say, hey, let's start moving in this direction. Let's start thinking about it. I mean, sounds like it's been not the easiest process, but also not anything overly cumbersome. So just curious.
The way that, I'm not going to try and take credit to say I was the first person to think about it in my company, but I did try to be the most vocal as soon as I could, right? As soon as it was clear that this was going to be a thing, is, hey, look, like my talking points were eventually there's going to be regulation, granted, not states-based, right? But we do like to do business outside of the country. So there's regulation that we want to get ahead of. This will help us think about how we want to essentially put the building blocks in place so that as we expand, as we want to go add our own models, start training on data, is essentially expanding on our usage of AI internally, that we could do so in a controlled manner, and we don't have to just go and hope that as we do it, we're doing it properly, doing it safely, so the house doesn't fall in on us. But then also from a customer transparency perspective, right? We're fortunate from a compliance perspective where most of our compliance is self-inflicted, meaning, right, like we're not in the med tech space. So like you, John, we don't have to, there's not a ton of laws that we have to follow as long as we're not overtly breaking anything that is more generally applicable. But the way that we've always kind of modeled it is, look, even if we don't have to, this is something that our customers would find peace in, or essentially would make them more comfortable to do business with us. If this is financially reasonable, we're going to go and pursue it, right? That's where maybe we start rubbing up on the line with high trust and FedRAMP, because those get into the 7 figures easy. But right, thankfully, most ISO engagements don't cost that much. So we consider an investment to, other than right doing things properly, then go ahead and say, dear customer base, we care about those things that you care about, and we hope that this is one of those things that'll put you at ease. And at the very least, we won't be in a position of causing you extra anxiety when you're trying to manage your own vendor base and how we're handling AI technology, right? So we're just trying to take security, risk, AI, those types of concerns off the table when it comes to discussions about whether we're going to be a good business partner or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know far more about like your side of the business, Whistic, than I do the medical side of things. So I'd imagine that also just obtaining this certification a feather in your cap from a competition standpoint as well. I mean, if you're comparing vendors like to like, and one has a certification that kind of gives you those warm and fuzzies, then it makes Whistic a more obvious choice. And
That's the hope. I mean, at that point, right, you could figure it's only a matter of time until the rest decide to follow suit. And then I don't know if it's really going to be beneficial to say that we were the first or among the first in our line of work to do that. But at the very least, until that becomes the point, then no, you're absolutely right, Kendra. We're hoping that that'll be a differentiator, of course.
it's at least got to be a marketing bullet out there somewhere, right?
Oh, I'm sure they will. I'm so far underskilled in the marketing area that I couldn't say, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't something out there eventually.
I actually just like fundamentally very much align with my company's mission statement, which is the goal to get life-changing products to people sooner. You'll probably maybe have a little bit of an indication of this. So in a former life, I was actually quality manager at a nutraceutical company. So part of getting out this stuff, some OTC drugs and whatnot. The stuff that I would do, we could have an error or an issue that would hold up a supply chain thing for a month. Like we would have this issue where you couldn't get the stuff out to people who needed it. I worked there during part of COVID even, and it was, frantic, just absurd. The goal of the company is to get this stuff out there. But the thing is you can't rush a proper process for making some of this stuff, any of the stuff really. So when we build out our solution, we want to make it so that customers can get to that point where they're getting all their documentation and paper done, which by the way, some of these people are doing near 1,000-page batch record documents to try and get this stuff to market for us. So next time you go to a hospital and someone gives you medicine, gives you whatever, there's like a whole army of people behind that just trying to get that to you so that you can trust that it's uniformly made, right? And to specification. So then our software comes in, and that's the goal of it, is to make sure that it aligns with that specification, that it meets the market requirements, that whatever the FDA has said is required gets done. And we're getting this done in a way that it's going from, some people have stuff on hold for 6 months to resolving those holds within days because they've switched over to what we do. Now, the reason the AI comes into place is because what if we could take that from 6 days down to 6 minutes to resolve some of these issues, right? We want these people to get this solution because we want more medicine. We want more supplies out to these hospitals to, all the different people who are taking care of us medically. We want that to be super fast. Problem is government folks, medical folks, last time you went to the doctor, I don't know if you peeked over your shoulder to see what software they were using on their computer, but I'm pretty sure that it's still running Windows 95.
Windows XP? No.
Windows XP. And the stuff that's running, they're slow adopters. They do not like to buy stuff that they do not trust or cannot trust. So if we're going to get our mission going for our organization, we have got to make something that's not only slick and works well, but we also have to show them, hey, we also meet all the regulations. When you get audited and the FDA comes on site and says, show me how this works, or I'm shutting you down, they have to be able to go, here's how you can trust it. Here's how we know. Here's the matrix, the risk analysis, the yada, yada, right? Everything that they need to have to be able to clear those hoops. That's what really pushed us towards this, is we saw that there was an opening for us to make our product more trustworthy. And we're like, let's get this in here, right? Sorry, I long-winded all of that.
Those were
good
great
answers.
answers. Yeah.
And it made me think as you were talking, how like we always talk about security and privacy and it's like hard to convince the business about the risk. Do you think that it's easy to show that there is AI risk and the business actually understands it a lot better than security and privacy? And like, it's been easier to get governance stuff done and things that maybe security and privacy you couldn't get through because they didn't really understand that risk, but everybody understands AI risk just because it's everywhere.
Everyone understands it because of all the movies about it, right?
Right.
Or they're
You've
fearful
got all
of
these,
it. Like
all
maybe
these scary
that's
reference
true.
points.
That's a good point. The robots taking over the world. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I guess that's my question. Has it been easier to convince people that we need to get in front of this because it is a big risk compared to security and privacy? Your face doesn't seem to agree with me. So
Well, I mean, what I'm trying to do is get away from the ever-present "it depends" answer. But I mean, I just don't think there's any getting away from it in a lot of cases, right? I think sometimes it is. Sometimes it is easier, right? Exactly like you're saying, whether it be fictionalized, right? Think Terminator, iRobot, right? The popular movies where AI is some component of it, right? Like, and again, whether it's a real risk or not, right? But people like to think about, right, that the romanticized version is, romanticized isn't the right term, but essentially, right, the fictionalized version of, oh, this is a bad thing that might happen. And sometimes it's easy to translate that. I do languages, so I like the concept of translating and interpreting. It's interpreting, not interpreting. Can't even do English today, geez. But it doesn't always translate well. It doesn't interpret well sometimes, right? Yeah, theoretically, some of these things that you see in the movies, read in the books, or see in the news headlines, right? Theoretically, sure, it could happen. The chances it's actually going to happen, though, right? But like we were talking about earlier, a very real risk of something happening, and something that we have to be really aware of is automated decision making for medical, for education, for government, for finance, right? I don't want to go apply for a loan and get turned down and have to ask an AI agent what happened and why I was declined, right? Because all it's going to do is say, oh, well, here's the parameters. Well, is this the same decision that a human would have made? Probably not, right? At least the way that a lot of the technology stands now. I couldn't say I'm not developing, I'm not working with it, but I'd be a lot more skeptical to take that rationale from a robot essentially than I would from a person, right? Because there's no discussion to be had. And I think that that's part of what I have a hard time getting others to understand sometimes is we have to be careful what right? AI tools only understand what we put in, right? And they only take what we feed it. And a lot of what's tough is there is no negotiation. There is no true discussion, right? We can have the back and forth between the tools, and it feels like we're having that discussion. We can give clarifications, we can ask for feedback and such, but there is no true negotiation in terms of what we can find most important, right? Because if we tell a robot it depends, all of a sudden you have to be very specific on what it depends on, and everything that comes downstream from that is then really tough. So that's where it's hard for us to say, no, you can't just go and use some of these tools using customer data, can't put in our contracts, can't put in our financial analysis docs, because what happens when you're starting to rely on this and there's all these contingencies that you didn't consider, right? It's nothing to do with you, the person. I just don't want you to be put in a position where you have to justify work that was supposed to be put off by you, that was then done by a robot, right? I want to protect you. Right, if you want to use this to augment, to confirm, whatever, great. But there's some real danger and risk there if we start trusting these things as if it's something as reliable autonomous beings, which is something that I think that we all sometimes have a little bit of a tendency to do, right? They talk like people. It's hard to not see them. It's hard to see them as not people sometimes.
Was it easier to convince the business to do 42,001 than 27,001?
A little bit. So I didn't have to do the initial. I didn't have to do the initial sell for 27,001. My boss at the time was European, so he's like, "Look, if you want to get into Europe, this is what they're asking for." But for me, like it was a unique selling position, because it's like, hey, look, this isn't just a compliance thing. This isn't something I can just do for you all, but this is something we're all going to have to do. But this is something that is going to make it easier for all of us going forward after we get the blocks in place. Because then we'll have to wonder, hey, what's kosher? What's going to be good? Is this going to be a safe way for us to build, grow, scale, change, and adapt? Because the pieces will already be in place. It's alterations at that point, not a whole new set of considerations that we didn't think about.
I agree with a lot of what Chris said. I do want to talk back about just a little bit about that one point where it's people associating risks with AI. I think a lot of people don't understand the full scope of risk with AI. One of the main ones, and Chris hit on it really, intensely there, and I want to emphasize this, is when we get into training AI, and I'm going to go a little out of my depth, so someone's going to get mad at you after I say this, it's fine. It'll create content for you. People will argue in the comments. When we go in and folks are training these AI models, they're giving them examples and they're trying to help train it. They're giving it feedback, right? They're saying, good, bad, this is, whatever. A lot of end users, all they're doing is inputting and taking what comes out, right? And as that cycle continues of, cool, I'll just take whatever you put out, and they put that back out into the public space, and it's reabsorbed by some of these, internet scraping tools, they're just teaching themselves and reinforcing the same bias over and over and over, and it's not getting to be a higher quality.
Again, this is going to make some people mad that I'm saying this because they're like, well, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, whatever. I know all you AI researchers out there. Actually, the researchers probably agree with me because I bridge your stuff, so whatever. But what I will say is this. People are going in and they are trusting the AI solutions because the trade-off is incredibly desirable. I can now do my job 5 times faster and I don't have to deal with the usual garbage I have to because the tool does it for me, right? And the people who are checking my work just trust it because they've trusted my work in the past, right? They don't care that it was done by an AI. I did it. It comes out from my face, my name, right? Eventually that can come back to bite you in the butt. But what if it never does, right? That's my concern, is the quality of work generally may decrease as we are doing it faster. So if we are faster and faster creating lower quality work, that's a risk I don't think people are really concerned about at this point in time. I do want to say though that, and I'll set that aside for a moment. If anyone want to pick that call back up, you can. I'm going to let it burn over there to the left. But the adoption, so much easier because I went, or I guess our org went, we already have, 27001 and it just ties in with all the stuff that's in the 42001 stuff. And then everyone went, oh, okay. And then we just had the funding. It was super easy.
That's good notes. I'm going to keep that for next time.
Convince them it's easy. Set the bar low.
Are we scaling lower quality work with AI? Well, that is a question that is hard to answer. It only makes my work better. So there you go.
And will any of us be smart enough to realize it because we've become so reliant on AI? No.
Or will the next generation even be able to know that they're supposed to check for them?
Okay, sorry. I'm going to say something. I read an article. Yeah, I'm picking that coal back up. Okay. Ouch. I read an article the other day of a CEO over some huge corporate fund, whatever. Anyway, this guy, I don't know what he does. He just makes a lot of money and he knows a lot of stuff. So he posts things, right? You know, the kind. And he says he's in a meeting with a college student. And as he's speaking with him, he just notices this college student has a very hard time talking to him and will stop and stutter and try to think of the words. And he goes, okay, I just got to say, you're a doctorate student. Why are you struggling to speak to me? And this discussion turns over to, he says, well, when I can't think of things to say when I'm texting folks, I just ask ChatGPT, here are the words I'm thinking of. What are some words that are similar? He says, I can't do that when I'm having a live conversation with you. That is part of my concern. Case study.
I thought that was a huge risk because I look at my kids and I'm like, if AI is generating their responses to everything and they won't develop the same critical thinking skills that we had to develop for communication naturally. I agree. And we just went totally off topic, but
sorry.
Maybe GRC people will. I don't know what that means for GRC.
That is very relevant.
I'll let Elliot tie that one together.
I got this very simple for you. It doesn't have to just be a GRC thing. We're clearly getting dumber through the use of AI, and there are studies coming out about that. And that is a risk to the business. You have dumber employees. There you go.
Oh, but wait. No. Okay, now let's tie back. Let's tie back to the standard now. You have to be doing ethical impact analysis on these tools. Is your tool making people dumber? Have you analyzed the ethics of what you're doing?
It is a societal impact that no one is talking about, right?
Yeah.
I mean, well, I can tell you that OpenAI isn't talking about it and they know it.
No, they're not talking about it.
Meta, knowing that their platforms cause, mental health issues in kids, but they don't talk about it and they don't want it to come out. So it'll be a very similar thing with the AI. For sure.
You're tying it into the real, I think the core of why you have a GRC team, which is how do you make a good, trustworthy product, right? And how do you let people know that? I know we get into financials a lot, but what about the ethics? What about the societal impacts? If you're building a good GRC program, shouldn't you have at least a little bit of that in there? I don't know.
Unless nobody cares.
Unless nobody cares and it can't make you any money.
Well, it's a great way to end it. Unless nobody cares out there.
I think that's part of why we're in the job, though, right? We care, right?
That's true.
How we then translate and portray that value, that's also a part of our burden. But I think if no one cared, then we wouldn't have our jobs, right? We're okay going through the struggle, making things manual where it has to be, right? Because we know at the end of the day, we are aware, and we've communicated the risks, communicated the values and the paths forward for those other people that are doing other things, right? It's up to them to make the decision, but at least we know and can sleep well as a result, knowing that we've made these considerations. This isn't arbitrary. It's very specific to our situations, and there's nothing more that we can expect from ourselves.
You should post that, Chris, all over LinkedIn and let it go viral. And I will
Well,
like
you're going to have to remind me what I just said. I forgot it already.
Well, we
It's
recorded
recorded.
it. Don't worry. I did think of something else though that I did ask ChatGPT or ask Siri the other day. Same thing. I, in case you guys want to know, I thought of this while we were talking. I was really paying attention to your responses. Trust me. But I did ask it also what the average price of a dozen eggs is in the U.S. The reason I was asking is because I was trying to figure out the price of SOC 2 audits are going so low that you can get it for about $5,000. How many eggs does that equal now? I wanted to like figure that math out and be like, oh, it's 100 dozen eggs can get you a SOC 2 audit now. That's what I was
That's the
trying to
math.
figure out with it.
That's the content we're looking for, Troy, right there.
Hey, I used
So what you're
AI.
saying? What you're saying is retirement plan is to raise some chickens, sell some eggs, right?
Me and Elliot's got chickens. I wonder how that's going for him.
No
Not
comment.
very
I
good.
now have 3 roosters instead of 1.
Oh boy.
Let me tell you, that's not a good mix.
No.
On that note,
That brings us to the end of this episode. You know what, Kendra? I feel like we didn't know you enough. You wanna summarize this? You wanna wrap us up and take us home?
I can, sure. Yeah, so this has been our episode on ISO 42001. I got it right that time. I am not AI generated. And yeah,
Sure.
Jonathan, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your insights on just how this process is going for you, where you think the future is going in terms of ISO 42001. And yeah, anything else? I don't know. Troy?
that's
Throwing me to the fire with these outros?
Yeah,
This
that
is
was
crap.
cool.
I did that only
Who's
because
that?
I didn't want to say the framework and screw it up.
42,001.
No.
All right, everyone, that was our episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to GRC Uncensored, the podcast, where Troy and Kendra know shit, and our producer just talks shit. To learn more about GRC, go to grcuncensored.com, subscribe to our newsletter, or join our community on Reddit. Viewpoints expressed during the show do not reflect the brands, employers, or companies of our hosts, guests, or sponsors.